Everybody, it's Rocco Million with Real Progressives. Today I want to get back into talking about what government's role is and some simple facts about our government and capitalism according to the Constitution. And because I get a lot of pushback on this, I want to be more clear and not stumble over my words, and really just remind everybody that this is basic stuff. It's very well documented. Anybody can look up the Constitution of the United States. Anybody can look up Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It mandates that Congress mint and tax to provide for the general welfare of society and the common defense thereof. So, government, we are guaranteed government for, of, and by the people. This is democratically, socially owned government for the general welfare, for the public purpose. Okay, that's socialism, and it's baked right into the Constitution before socialism was even a word. Capitalism only exists in the private sector, and only to the extent that our socially owned government allows. All right, the government owns the private sector with its ability to impose tax and be the monopoly issuer. Plus, government is the supreme authority per the Constitution. Last time I said that, someone was saying, well, churches don't pay tax and blah, 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 and we own our property. We have deeds and titles. And I said, well, don't pay your property tax and see what that deed and title will do for you then. All right. And if government needs that land that the church is sitting on, they have a thing called eminent domain that they could take that land. Government is the supreme authority per the Constitution. Like I did, Article 1, there's no mistaking. Article 1 mandates that Congress mint and tax for the general welfare of society and the common defense thereof. So government needs certain real resources for society. Government doesn't need money. It makes money from thin air by congressional decree, using its power granted from the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. So it makes money from thin air by congressional decree. What it needs is real resources. Things like military, labor for the military, legal systems, sanitation systems, infrastructure, healthcare, education. Government needs all this stuff for the general welfare of society to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare. Okay, government never needs revenue or profit to do this. And this is why, capitalism in the private sector is ill-equipped to provide these things for society, because the for-profit model is, it's good for, luxury items, but when it comes to human rights, when it comes to public sector needs, that the for-profit model falls very short. It doesn't provide the things that people need. It provides quality on a cost basis. So if you don't have the money, then you don't get the service, you don't get the quality. So our society isn't for profit. It makes dollars on demand at will by congressional decree from thin air. It needs real resources. So it uses taxation and spending as a means of production. Government taxation creates unemployment, so it can provision society with real resources using paid employment. That's the whole deal. It's a social construct. It's a means of production. So government can satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare. Government imposes tax on the private sector. Then people are all of a sudden unemployed. They have to sell their goods and labor to government to get dollars so they can pay their tax and stay free and keep their stuff. This is how government provisions the society with roads and infrastructure and police and military and all this other stuff. And per the Constitution, this is how government got us to stop living off the land and start working for the general welfare of society, per the Constitution. So government, never needs profit. Profit and capitalism only exist in the private sector. and only to the extent that our socially owned government allows. Nobody even owns property in America. In reality, we all rent. We all pay tax, okay? Just like communist China. You know, the only free market is the black market. Even the dollars in your pocket belong to the government, and they're subject to recall taxation at any time per the Constitution. You know, we're only legally allowed to spend government's dollars on the government regulated economy, buying government regulated goods and services. All right, so the only free market is the black market. This is simple facts. These are facts. They're non-ideological, non-partisan. I didn't make them. It's in the Constitution. So, you know, government uses taxation and spending. How government spends determines everything. Okay, it determines how we, you know, distribute and utilize and organize the real resources of the whole nation for the public purpose, you know, for the general welfare of society. So that's the whole thing, you know, and so this sounds a lot more like central planning than it does free markets, you know, and again, I didn't make these facts, it's just the way it is. How government spends, in fact, does determine everything. Government is the currency issuer. It decides what work it needs done. It decides the price it'll pay. It decides how to regulate everything, every market in the economy. Government is the supreme authority per the Constitution. So, you know, there is no free market without government spending dollars into the economy. All right, and again, so government provisions itself by taxing the private sector, and that drives real resources to the public sector. All right, so that the public sector can satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. So, you know, when people say the government needs to just stay out of the way and not get involved, they're not understanding the operational reality of our economy, of our world. The fact of the matter is, government is the supreme authority, and how government spends determines everything. If government stopped spending tomorrow, you know, factories would stop, you know, economic output would dry up, millions of people would die. All right, government, it keeps the wheels moving. It spends dollars into the economy to get economic output, and so that it can satisfy the general welfare of society. Then it taxes the dollars back out of existence, and that closes it's a closed circuit, and then it spends more back in. It's just a social construct. It's a means of production. You know, so this is why we, you know, government, its job is society, the general welfare of society. Only government can balance the economy and society in a sustainable green way, because only government, it doesn't have to look for profit. Only government is mandated to supply for the general welfare, and profit has nothing to do with it. So, you know, government will use taxation to create unemployment so it can satisfy the general welfare with paid employment. It's that simple, guys. And it's government's job to balance the economy and society, the only in a sustainable way. The only way you do that is by spending at the bottom, you know, with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants one. And it's just simple logic. When you spend at the bottom, people need the services of the skilled and educated above them. So demand travels up naturally. It doesn't trickle down. You know, when you give demand at the bottom, the top makes more supply to match that demand. That's how you balance the economy. And then people at the bottom aren't precarious, you know, so they're not crazy. So society is much more balanced. The economy is more balanced. You know, with a federal job guarantee, we have a democratic means of production through which we could increase the real resources of just about any real resource we need for the general welfare of society. So this is how you meet everybody's base needs in America, raise everybody's standard of living without raising taxes, without making cuts, because public debt for society and a higher standard of living is the entire point of government in dollars to begin with, guys. Government's purpose is not to make profits for the 1%. Government's purpose is to make a society that benefits all right? That's the facts. And so a socially owned government is supposed to work for the public purpose first and foremost, and then let the individual make what they can from the balanced economy that ensues. Our socially owned government is never supposed to work for the private purpose of the individual and force our society to make do with the scraps. That's fascism. And that can't, that's not balancing the economy. That runs counter to the general welfare. That's not how you get civil society. Intentionally targeting unemployment, intentionally creating systemic poverty, inflicting police terror, teaching our kids to put profit over people in society, cutting the social safety net, privatizing the public space and deregulating everything, starving the economy of public spending and then forcing everybody into copious amounts of private debt from predatory lenders is not how you get civil society. So it's not consistent with the general welfare of society. All right. And it doesn't take a PhD to understand this stuff, and until regular people like you and me start standing up and speaking this truth and inserting this logic everywhere it's needed, nothing's going to ever change. Because the top, they're fine. Even the middle, they're fine with the status quo. All right. We have to force change from the bottom. And, the problem is too many people believe the right wing neoliberal lies and scare tactics designed to keep us, divided, designed to keep us from uniting in solidarity for the public purpose. And so once we learn MMT, which is our operational reality, then we can destroy all the right-wing lies and myths that keep us divided with simple logic and scientific fact. That's how we unite all sides for the public purpose. This is revolutionary. MMT is the revolutionary vehicle we've all been waiting for, because it just describes our operational reality in a nonpartisan, non-ideological way with scientific facts from the macro level of the economy. That's it. Once you understand that, then these right-wing lies like trickle down. You can eviscerate them with simple logic. You can say, hey, demand naturally travels up. When you give people at the bottom money, they have to spend that money. They have immediate needs. And so they need the jobs that are skilled and educated above them. When you give the top money, they've had money all along. They just put it in their savings or invest in finance in the stock market. And this doesn't add real production to the economy, okay? Because finance, it doesn't add real production value. What it does instead is it extracts wealth in the form of economic rents. And so it's just this is very inefficient spending. If you want to balance a capitalist, consumer-driven economy, you have to spend at the bottom. That's the only way to balance it. And if you want everybody to derive good benefit from your economy and society, then you have to balance it by spending at the bottom with a federally guaranteed living wage job for every person who wants one. It's the only way it works. And until we all collectively stand up with one voice, united, and demand it, a federal job guarantee today, then nothing will change, and all problems in society start, have their roots in economics, and they have their solutions in macroeconomics. So no matter what you're talking about, drug addiction, gun violence, racism, we can deal with all of these things through economics, okay? And that's the only way. That's the only way. So learn this operational truth. Don't listen to the lies of the ruling class, okay? Go out, look up people like Dr. Stephanie Kelton, people like Dr. Bill Mitchell, Dr. Joe Firestone, Dr. Fidel Kaboub, Dr. Pavlina Chinova, Mike Norman, look up Steve Grumbine, Real Progressives, follow Deficit Owls, follow Modern Money Network. Because these are the people speaking truth to power, all right? These are the people that can get our progressive movement funded And if you don't know how to pay for our progressive agenda, then you're useless to us. I'm sorry. You may have good intentions. Look at Bernie's good intentions got us. All right. He had a great campaign and great goals, but because he never explained the operational reality, people only saw that his campaign had $33 trillion in spending and only taxed $19 trillion in spending. So he got the moniker of Crazy Bernie, like he couldn't do math, because he never explained that federal taxes can't fund spending. All right, there's nothing to tax until government first spends dollars into existence. All right, he never explained that. It would be like starting a game of Monopoly by collecting rents. That's impossible. Money always needs to be issued first. So government never needs to look for money. When Hillary Clinton tried to, tell Bernie that his plans were pie in the sky and we couldn't pay for all this stuff, all Bernie had to say was, any program and every program is fully funded when Congress writes a bill for it. When Congress does a congressional decree for spending to fund a program, it's fully funded. That's it. We make dollars from thin air by congressional decree. Government never needs revenue or profit. It's constitutionally mandated to make money from thin air. So because Bernie didn't explain these things, it was counterproductive, and we got slaughtered in the news media and all over. And then afterwards, after the campaign, then he goes out for, single payer, and he adds in a pointless tax to the bill. And he adds in pointless taxes to get single payer. And so with a Republican majority, that made the bill DOA. It's dead on arrival. There's no way it could win. And it's horrible because it's completely pointless. We don't have to add in any taxes for single payer, okay? And he knows that because we just passed hurricane relief. We just passed a huge military defense spending bill. We didn't raise taxes. Of course not, because, when it comes to military and stuff like that, everybody, they don't argue the fact that government makes the money. They only argue that fact when we need social programs, when we need government to invest in its people and society. So this is why it's so important to understand. If we have the real resources to meet the demand for any program, we could always afford that program without raising taxes, without making cuts, and it'll still be non-inflationary spending. So when it comes to when it comes to single payer healthcare, we have the real resources to meet the demand for healthcare in America. We already cover every single person through the ERs. It's just less humane. It's less efficient. We pay much more than everybody else and we get much less. So single payer would in fact be deflationary. All right. The operational reality is we would never need to raise taxes for single payer. It's going to cost us less and we're going to get a better result for society. When the main, the money part of the equation doesn't matter, guys. All that matters is we have enough real resources available for people to buy with the money. So our main thing, government, it's mandated for the general welfare. So it needs to, protect and maintain our productive capacity. All right. We need to be constantly investing in our education system because we need smart people to produce all of our needs for tomorrow. It needs to invest in top-notch healthcare for everybody because we need, healthy, because sick, miserable populations don't make, and they're not going to be able to produce all our needs. We need to be investing in sustainable green energy so that we're not depleting our natural resources and poisoning ourselves in the process. This is the whole thing. These are government's job. Whenever you put for profit in education and things like healthcare and anything, then it becomes it's much more inefficient. But people will say, oh, well, the profit motive will make things more efficient. We need to apply market discipline, and in reality, that's insanity. They're not understanding our operational reality. When government never needs to worry about profit. So it's free to worry about needs. It's free to worry about care, quality of care above all else. because its main concern is the general welfare of society. Its main concern is society itself and the common defense thereof. So, even libertarians, they're not going to deny that government needs labor for the military. Government needs legal systems, sanitation systems. Government needs infrastructure. So how does government get this stuff? There's only a couple ways. They either go out and they use slavery to provision society with this stuff, or they impose a monetary system. They impose a tax on the private sector. Then the private sector got to become sellers of goods and services to government to get dollars to pay their tax and stay free and keep their stuff. Now, after government spends more into the economy than it taxes out, a deficit spends, then we in the non-government in the economy, we could save dollars and do business amongst ourselves. But the tax is still the original thing that gives the dollar, guaranteed demand and universal demand in society and everywhere. It's always the tax that's the foundation of the dollar. So people need to understand all of this. We can always unite in solidarity, the working class, because without us, there is no society. Without the working class working, there is no society. So we can always unite in solidarity and force our government to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society, which would be balancing the economy and society in a sustainable green way. The only way you balance a consumer-driven capitalist society is by spending at the bottom with a federally guaranteed jobs program. Okay, and then nobody would be, dependent on private credit just to survive and consume production. We wouldn't be the precarious class. Government would be able to, have a much better society, guys. And that's government's job. It's not the profits of the 1%. It's society. And until we, the people, understand that and collectively demand it with one voice, we're going to keep getting fascism. We're guaranteed government for, of, and by the people. All right, that's socialism. That's a democratically, socially owned government. But if we accept our socially owned government working for the private purpose of the 1% at society's expense, they're going to give us fascism every time. All right, so that's the deal. All right, we the people have all the power collectively, but we have to stop believing the right-wing neoliberal lies that keep us divided. We have to learn MMT to smash all these right-wing scare tactics with simple logic and scientific fact, so that we could unite all sides for the public purpose first and foremost, guys. That's it, because we're about saving lives. All right, if you want to tax the rich before we save lives, then you're going to accept pointless austerity that kills just like bullets until we raise taxes on the rich, until we get more revenue from the rich. We don't need that. Government never needs revenue. We don't need to cut defense spending before government spends on society. All right, we don't need to end the Fed before government spends on society. Government makes all dollars by congressional decree from thin air. All right, that's the facts. Learn MMT. Thanks, guys. Take it easy. Oh, it doesn't want to let me go now, huh? Figures, cuts me off usually tonight and won't let me go. Wow. And there you go.